Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today's story is about a woman who thought she had everything figured out. Money, status, power, confidence, and a man who had almost nothing, at least. That's what the world believed. What started as a joke turned into a lesson she would never forget. Her name was Veronica Hale. At just 32, she was already a rising financial consultant at one of the biggest firms in the city. She wore tailored suits that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her heels clicked with authority. Her calendar was always full. Her phone never stopped buzzing. She gave advice to executives, influencers, small business owners. People trusted her with their investments, their retirement plans, their dreams, and she loved the power of it. That afternoon, Veronica stood on the side of a busy highway, staring at her luxury sedan, its hood open, smoke curling into the air like a quiet accusation. She sighed, frustrated. She had an important client dinner in 2 hours. This was not part of the plan. A small, slightly rusted tow truck pulled up behind her car. Out stepped a man in grease-stained jeans and a faded work shirt. His hands were rough, his boots worn. There was an oil smudge across his cheek. He looked about 40, maybe a little older, with calm brown eyes that didn't rush. "Car trouble?" he asked gently. Veronica glanced at him, then back at her phone. Obviously, he didn't seem offended. "Mind if I take a look?" She stepped aside impatiently. He leaned over the engine, listening more than looking. Within minutes, he spoke calmly. "Overheated. Looks like a coolant leak. I can patch it temporarily so you can make it home, but you'll need a proper repair." Veronica blinked. That's it. In less than 15 minutes, he had her car running again. She folded her arms. "How much?" $70 for the roadside fix." She raised an eyebrow. "Only $7." He shrugged. "It's honest work." Something about his tone annoyed her. It wasn't submissive. It wasn't desperate. It was steady, and maybe that's what made her smirk. "So," she said lightly, leaning against her car, "since you're clearly such an expert at fixing things, let me ask you something." He wiped his hands with a rag. "Sure, I'm a financial consultant," she said proudly. "I manage portfolios worth millions. But humor me. What's your best financial advice?" She expected him to laugh, to stumble, to admit he didn't know anything about that world. Instead, he looked at her quietly. "Live below your means," he said simply. "Save before you spend. Invest in what you understand, and never mistake income for wealth." She blinked. That wasn't what she expected. She crossed her arms. "That's it. That's your grand wisdom." He smiled slightly. "Most people make money complicated. It isn't," she chuckled. "And you learned all this?" "Where?" "Mechanic school." He didn't react to the jab. "From making mistakes, and from watching people who had a lot of money lose it." She rolled her eyes playfully. "So tell me, Mr. Financial Guru, how much do you have invested?" He looked at her for a moment, almost amused. Enough. She laughed. "What does that even mean?" "It means my bills are paid. My daughter's college fund is growing, and I sleep well at night." She paused slightly at the mention of his daughter, but quickly masked it. "Well," she said, reaching into her purse, handing him a $100 bill. "Here's your $70. Keep the change. Consider it a tip for the entertainment." He looked at the money but didn't immediately take it. "I don't need the extra," he said calmly. "Trust me," she replied. "You probably do." Their eyes locked for a second. Something in his gaze was unshaken, not defensive, not proud, just steady. He accepted the 70, handed back the 30. "Thank you," he said. "Drive safe." As he walked back to his truck, Veronica felt a strange flicker of irritation. She wasn't sure why. She had meant it as a harmless joke, but his composure unsettled her. She drove away, shaking her head. "People," she muttered. But that night, as she sat at the elegant restaurant with her wealthy client, something unexpected happened. The client, a tech entrepreneur, sighed heavily over dessert. "I'm making more money than ever," he confessed, "but I feel like I'm drowning. New house, new car, investments I barely understand. I can't keep up." Veronica launched into her polished advice. Diversify, restructure, refinance, optimize tax exposure. He listened politely, then said quietly, "I don't need complex strategies. I need peace." For a split second, the mechanic's voice echoed in her mind. "Live below your means. Save before you spend. Never mistake income for wealth." She shook it off. Days passed, weeks, but something strange began to happen. More and more of her high-income clients seemed stressed, anxious, exhausted. They chased returns. They leveraged debt. They flaunted success online. But behind closed doors, many were one bad investment away from collapse. One evening, Veronica found herself driving past a small neighborhood garage. A simple sign read, "Mendoza Auto Repair." She slowed. She didn't know why, but she pulled in. Inside, the same mechanic stood under a lifted pickup truck. He looked down and recognized her immediately. "Car trouble again?" he asked lightly. "No," she said, almost offensively. "I just happened to be nearby." He nodded. "What can I do for you?" She hesitated. "That advice you gave me," she said, finally. "About wealth. What did you mean by not mistaking income for wealth?" He lowered the lift and wiped his hands again. "Income is what you earn," he said. Wealth is what you keep. She stayed silent. Most people upgrade their lifestyle every time their income rises. He continued. Bigger house, better car, fancier vacations. They look rich, but they're fragile. One crisis, and it all falls apart. She crossed her arms, but not defensively this time. Thoughtfully, and you? She asked. You don't upgrade. He smiled. My truck works. My house is paid off. My daughter doesn't care if we fly first class. She cares if I show up to her school play. The simplicity of it felt almost foreign to her. But don't you want more? She pressed. More what? Status, recognition, comfort. He looked around his modest garage. The tools were organized. The space was clean. I want freedom, he said quietly. Freedom from debt. Freedom from impressing people. Freedom to close this shop early. If my kid needs me, that word hit her harder than she expected. Freedom. She had money. She had clients. She had reputation. But freedom, her phone buzzed constantly. Her schedule dictated her life. Her mortgage was enormous. Her luxury apartment downtown cost more than she admitted to anyone. She drove home in silence that night. For the first time, she opened her own financial spreadsheet not as a consultant, but as a person. She stared at the numbers. Yes, her income was impressive, but her expenses were aggressive. The car lease, the designer wardrobe, the upscale gym membership she barely used, the fine dining, the constant upgrades. She was one market downturn away from panic. Weeks turned into months. She found herself visiting the garage occasionally, sometimes under the excuse of minor maintenance, sometimes just to talk. She learned his name was Daniel Mendoza. He had inherited the garage from his father. He expanded it slowly, without loans. He invested in index funds consistently for 20 years. Small amounts at first, larger amounts later. No flashy bets, no crypto hype, no risky ventures. Slow money, he called it. One afternoon, curiosity got the best of her. If you don't mind me asking, she said carefully, how much have you built? He looked at her steadily. Enough to retire tomorrow, he answered. She laughed instinctively, then stopped when she saw he wasn't joking. You're serious? Very. Her mind raced. A mechanic, retiring early, without noise, without status. Why don't you? She asked. He shrugged. Because I like fixing things. And because purpose matters too. That night, Veronica couldn't sleep. She thought about the endless networking events, the forced smiles, the subtle competition between colleagues over watches and cars. She thought about Daniel's quiet confidence, his freedom, and for the first time, she questioned her own definition of success. Over the next year, something shifted. Veronica started making changes no one noticed at first. She downsized her apartment quietly, sold her luxury car, and bought something reliable. Reduced unnecessary subscriptions, stopped chasing high-risk investments for her personal portfolio. She still worked hard, but she restructured her life. Her colleagues teased her. Midlife crisis. One joked. She smiled. Clarity. She began advising her clients differently too. Less about aggressive growth, more about sustainability, emergency funds, debt elimination, mindful spending. Some left her, chasing higher returns elsewhere, but others stayed, grateful. One evening, she stopped by the garage again. Daniel was closing early. School play, she guessed. He grinned. You're learning. She handed him something. A small envelope. What's this? He asked. An invitation, she said. I'm hosting a seminar. Not for millionaires. For everyday workers, mechanics, teachers, nurses. I want to teach what you reminded me of. He looked surprised. Me? He opened the envelope slowly. The title read, Building Real Wealth, Freedom Over Flash. He looked at her eyes, softer than before. You didn't need a mechanic for financial advice, he said quietly. She shook her head. No, she admitted. I needed someone who understood money without being controlled by it. The seminar filled beyond capacity, and at the back of the room, grease-stained hands folded calmly. Daniel listened as Veronica spoke. Not about luxury portfolios, but about living below your means. About saving before spending. About investing simply. About protecting peace. She ended her talk with a smile. Sometimes, she said, the wisest financial advice doesn't come from the richest-looking person in the room. Sometimes it comes from someone who already has what truly matters. Enough, and in that moment, she wasn't the woman who had mocked a mechanic. She was the woman who had learned from him, and she would never mistake income for wealth again.